This is Trust Talks, an Insurtech Insights podcast hosted by Clearspeed. I'm your host, Danny Ngsikwa. Really excited for this episode of Trust Talks. Joining us today are Kristoffer Lundberg, Insurtech Insights CEO, and Alex Martin, Clearspeed CEO. In their recent fireside chat, they dove into the value of trust as a competitive advantage for insurers today, and we're going to dig into that for this episode. So Chris, Alex, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So I'm going to jump right into a trust question. The central theme to this podcast, of course, is trust. So let's talk about it. Could you both frame up your key takeaway on why trust is a competitive advantage for insurers?
Trust is, it's zoom out and think about what insurance actually is, or what a wider economy it is. The infrastructure to help new technologies, new industries move faster, take more risk. And as part of taking that risk, we need to have better ways that we can build trust. To underwrite risk, it wouldn't have been done before. And so, trust is such an important part of the foundation of insurance. And how can we build more trust between insurers and policyholders going in, taking on new risks, and trust the ability to trust that the insurer will be there. And how you also have the insurer trust that we're not dealing with fraudulent exploitation and of the industry. So it is such a key important part of it. And a lot of people said that their lives usually are very much impacted by catastrophes. And so do they trust that the industry is there for them when they need them? So there's just so many angles that word plays a big part of what insurance is all about.
Absolutely. Alex?
I think he said it better than I could. So I'll just take that and progress it to the next element, which I think is perfectly said, is then you have that dynamic. And now you're left with trusting everyone or trusting no one or picking someplace in between. And that's where we all exist, right? You don't want to blindly trust every claim as it comes through and pay it. You also don't want to pay no claim. So you have a benchmark. That's a trade-off. Mm-hmm. So we're at a moment right now where you have a decision with trust being so fundamental, not only, as he mentioned, externally to the market, internally, and you have this trade-off, which is leading to a compromise, which will simply break us. It'll break relationships. It will break trust. Things will break down. And so this is that moment where we can step back and say, how can we lead with trust and have a compromise-free approach to reestablishing it? And I think what was really interesting, which we talked about on stage, was then that dynamic, how it unfolds as much to the technology, but where I really love that we talked a lot about is actually the people that have to assume risk to implement it, test it, try it, develop it, implement it, and then deploy it. And then the actions that happen within the organization, the external, internal stakeholders. And I think that it's really ironic. We're talking about trust, which is the coin of the realm, how it's driven by the need for innovation and technology going back to humans again. That to me is the most interesting aspect of what we're really discussing today more broadly in the market.
So with that in mind, I mean, we've established that trust is critical. We've established why. Seems like there's a trust gap though in insurance, for many different reasons. System maybe not working the way that it should be in a new age of things, legacy systems, things like that, consumer trust waning, for example, and then an opportunity for how insurers can better trust their customers. So there's a lot, but with that in mind, is money being left on the table? And if so, what does that look like and what can we do to change that?
Yeah, I think there's definitely the opportunity left for insurers to take on in potentially segments of the industry clients that they couldn't have done in the past, through the use of some of these technologies that will help them understand the customer better and build that trust that will allow them to underwrite risks that we haven't seen before and go into areas that's not. And so I think that that's really what I see a lot of new technologies coming in is like how it's broadening the scope of what insurance can cover and where insurance can play a role. So definitely say that.
So imagine this is the recipe. Consumer expectations are ever increasing because they have in their own lives technologies they trust to do what it says they do, whether it's social media, transact, how we all communicate and live our lives. We trust this technology to do it. The expectation of how that technology behaves for me, the consumer, for something I pay for, the expectation is wildly growing every single month. Then you come back to this industry. So against the backdrop of that, you have an industry that's being attacked on every surface by professional fraudsters, opportunistic fraudsters, all elements, risk that's changing the market with climate, all these things outside of their control is also changing faster than ever. So they were coming at rising expectations faster than ever, changing in the world, market volatility, the risk that they were taking and pricing even a quarter ago is changing, and no one can predict it because data is a trailing indicator for future performance.
Right.
And so they're stuck in this terrible position. And then it's easy to run towards fear and zero trust. Or could this be an opportunity to reaffirm how to use trust technology with trusted workforce to a trusted end user to build that bridge and solve that gap? That's where we're at. That is the moment we're at. And we're going to see how the market reacts.
And that leads me to another question. So if we put that into practice, like leveraging trust in the context of the insurance lifecycle, what if insurers had a way to more confidently trust that information that they're getting from customers? Like whether at point of application, renewals, when they submit a claim, how would that impact processes, people, business? Like what could things look like instead?
I think that it could look the way in which we're used to behaving with technology from some of the leading technology providers on the planet. And you think about what Apple and Google, and you think about how they think about the customer experience first. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that a lot more, especially over the past couple of years. The digital journey, what's the experience like to solve these claims? So I think the intent and the action behind the intent is moving in that direction. It's just not moving fast enough.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not outpacing the volatility outside their control, and it's not outpacing the fraudsters attacking them. And so I think there's this acknowledgement that we don't move as fast and we can't move as fast as an industry. But what can we do? And how do we bridge that? And I think it starts with communication strategy. Everything you read about in marketing for insurance carriers, and we're there for you. And like when you call, we'll answer. How many professional customer service support people exist in insurance companies? No one. It's a claims agent. So the first thing they're doing is getting your claim to pay you to do their job, and they do a great job, but it's hard. And now you're getting shook down because they think they're a fraudster. It's the exact opposite of what the market sees, which is when I call, you pay. Hurricane Milton just happened. My roof is off. My family lives in a travel lodge.
Yeah.
I need money. Pay me. I pay you every month. Against the backdrop of maybe half of those claims are actually fraudulent. That's the tension. So I think there's this combination of what they're telling the market through sophisticated marketing has to align with some reality.
Yes.
There has to be some empathy from the market to understand that when fraud happens, their premiums rise, and therefore it's in their best interest to go through a couple extra steps because fraud is killing them too.
Yes.
Right. And that's where people have to meet in the middle and understand how we can bridge this. It's not going to happen as fast as the rise of any of the technology companies we're seeing, but there's a lot to be learned in that marketing strategy tied to how they deliver it, and then some outreach into the consumer market, which is really tough to do.
It's an interesting comment. Just to add to that, Chris, before we hear from you, we've heard a lot today about folks saying fundamentally consumers might not actually understand how insurance works in some capacity, which is why you have this echo chamber sometimes of negativity. And then the other thing is absolutely there's a requirement for the narrative to change from insurers. So instead of being known for a catchy jingle, for example, like tell more of those stories, like the empathetic stories where they help.
Imagine if you were to say, you know what, I'm going to lose market share, and I'm going to onboard only people that I feel are trustworthy people. Like pick any population, doesn't matter. I'm just saying like, hey, we think that teachers are a trustworthy population, and I'm just going to be the insurance company to all teachers, or USAA for the military, whatever the case may be. There's a lot of trusted people in communities. And this has nothing to do with race, gender, culture. I'm talking about just pockets of people you feel are better risk.
Yeah.
And you say, look, part of this process, we're going to start there, and we're not going to grow as much because we're going to have this trusted population. Now that you think about, wait a second, there's new populations coming in who have no data behind them. Maybe they're immigrant population. They deserve to get underwriting too. You say, okay, you know what? I should extend trust to you. Would you mind watching this 2-minute video on how insurance works? and one
Yeah.
day you'll get a claim, and we're going to ask you questions, and we may not be able to pay you in a day, but the expectation is we'll pay you in 2 weeks, and here's the process. And they have to watch it and say, I understand. And now they're educated.
Yes.
You can write the risk into this new population of people who should be trusted, and it's an exchange.
Yes.
And it's harder, and they may lose that person to go down the street to get it when that person's going through that terrible experience and says, this is awful. But who's going to be the first to do that? Because they're going to lose in the short term.
Right.
And that's where trust becomes an extension of leadership, taking risk. You got to get further out on the risk curve and do some things that you know have worked in the past and put into a business model that forces some of these two things to come together. That's the only way it's going to work.
Yeah, the education piece is so key that you're touching on there. It's like, it's not just what technologies can we implement in order to enhance trust and faster, but it's also what are we as an industry doing to educate policyholders about why are we implementing these technologies? It's actually to improve trust, but it's also that my just that communication is so it's part of like why we want to put on this conference. It's like increasing the amount of communication. And I think in times of change, I think you need to have more conversations and also two-way conversations. So hearing from policyholders, what are their concerns with some of these new technologies being implemented, and addressing those clearly. Is what I very often encourage insurers to do, is like be vocal about what you're looking to do from a technology point of view. Because like the same doomerism we see a bit in terms of how people affect the workforce and saying, oh, well, is these my job's going to be lost now and so on. I think given insurance maybe not have had the best reputation in the past, the guardrails does come out for consumers in insurance where they see new technologies coming up. They don't necessarily say, oh, these things are actually here to protect you or mitigate the risk rather than just cover the risk. So given that, I think it's more important to hammer that we communicate as an industry.
I want to pull the thread on that because I think that's so important.
Yeah.
Talked about education, communication, convening people to learn, discuss, collaborate. I think that's fundamental. I'll add one other thing, which is extending it to the incentives of the folks that have to leave this place and do something about it.
Yes.
And culture, creating a winning culture and elite performance is something that needs to be done, but also aligning the incentives of the people that have to do the hard work. We talked about blue collar mindset in industry when you're building with empathy and you're also having empathy for people doing the hard work. Imagine being on the SIU team. Imagine being the claim team. You're the junior claims person and you're being told, hey, there's this tool called Clearspeed. Come in, the C-suite likes it, start using it.
Yeah.
And they're going, what is this? And
No
how
one
do I
asked
use
me.
it? And they don't ask me. And how will it help me do my job?
Yeah.
And so what we're learning as a company, it's really important, is we'll come in and sit by the end users and say, how do you do your job now? Here's how this can help. And they go, actually, I don't like pressing button C. We do this a lot in the military. You get handed software or hardware and you just put it on the shelf, or you're using it not to its great capacity because no one took the time to educate you. And then no one aligned our incentives. Hey, carrier, claims VP, your people will be rewarded with whatever incentive,
Right.
to enact this thing, and watch what change happens when you tell people that some level bonus or even a day off, or even an hour off, or any recognition of you innovating in a tough market. Doesn't need to be financially based. We'll take what you talked about. So for education, communication, convening, tied to actually putting it in motion at that brass tacks level.
Yes.
That's where this could get lost. The vision up front being foresighted, and then the lack of trust inside the teams having to do the work.
That's a critical aspect of, let's say, technology innovation that I think, it's often talked about as just the big high level idea. But when you think about implementation, think about execution, you do have to think about the end users, and bringing all of those people along creates also a different sense of purpose and, to your point, incentive going forward. So, and maybe this is a good lead into our last question, because, we're talking about the real talk here. So this is the opportunity. If there's one thing you would want leaders listening to think about or to know or to start doing, what would that be?
For me, it has to do with a look in the mirror to how do the people that I lead tie to the objectives I want them to achieve, I want us to achieve. So inverting the hierarchical mindset to a flat or even an inverted
Yeah.
thought process. So you're coming at the problem by saying, I want to inject trust into my people first. So we're horizontally aligned, we're vertically aligned up to the decision makers, and they feel a part of the plan. Because something magic happens when you tell someone, going back to communication, whether it's your partner personally or business relationships or friends, when you set expectations of what you're going to do and you do it, magic happens.
Yes.
And if you fall short, as long as you're communicating any risk, people will usually be okay with that because you're communicating and you're transparent and you're doing the best you can to get there. So my message would just be, as all this technology comes, you have a choice. Start with your people, enable a culture that will adopt it, incentivize them to put it into motion, and then lead.
Yes.
Don't be a coward. The market, and this goes for government, this goes for commercial enterprise. It is littered with cowards. Silicon Valley has lost its imagination, so we now no longer have the benefit of capital providers who have imagination to back new companies that should be doing great things. They're building drone delivery, pizza app technology, and other stuff that just will not change our lives and will drive their personal incentives. So we have lack of imaginative capital tied to cowardly implementers and a market that's afraid. This is the recipe for disaster. So get some courage and get your job done.
Thank you, Alex. Chris?
It ties back to communication again. Something I advise so many of the tech companies that are here today is I want to hear, people are craving to hear real stories of how you have implemented this and what actually came from this. And I think so it's daring to go deep and question the value proposition of your product.
Yes.
And it's something we started doing as an organization with this conference also throughout the last years. It's having calls. I've had calls with attendees from the conference over the past weeks and asking them, okay, from the people you met last year, tell me about those experiences. What actually came of that conversation? And you end up coming with some stories that those stories are so powerful for the rest of the organization, so they trust the product, trust what we're doing, and also for other customers being able to talk with your technologists coming in and saying, hey, come to the conference, so and so on, this is what has happened. I think it's so we've ended up in this vague sphere of talking about AI that people are longing for. Okay, well, tell me about some really good use case here that can help to trust. I was speaking with some insurers about this, where I was asking, what do you want to see from the people, the vendors, or the tech companies that are looking to engage with you? And then you just all said, I want to hear what have my peers done with it. That's what I want to see. I want to see real results.
Yes.
So I really say to leaders, dare to go deep and question your value proposition.
Yes.
And actually see, what did your product actually do for your customer? And when you see that, shout it to everyone, shout it to the organization, because that's going to build trust in your team, first and foremost.
Absolutely.
To go out and implement this and be confident that this is working, or trust for your customers that you're there. And in some way also, it just reinforces the trust that's already there with existing partners of yours, that you are there and you're actually asking them, hey, this partnership that we have, let's talk about the sustainability of it and so on. It's we really care about that. So that's what I would say. But
so for all those listening, Chris and Alex, they want us to get a little uncomfortable. Look in the mirror, question the value prop, which I think is absolutely true. And as an industry, as a whole, I mean, not really resting on your laurels of what you think is working. Don't be a coward. Really, really take a look at what can be done. Go to the end user level. Think about the entire culture and the entire journey. Also think about outcomes, not just big shiny things either. And really think about the incentives to change, and then get going. So you heard it here, folks. Those are the marching orders for the next little while here. Chris, Alex, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciated your perspectives as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bill.